So after a week away in which William Kedjanyi did a sterling job, I am back in the hot seat at the polling station, and it is with William Kedjanyi and the great Paul Krishnamurty that we will talk this week. And don't you love a 5-6 each of two mark at William Kedjanyi?
Yes, we absolutely love to see it. The Conservative Party probably don't because it's literally our head-to-head match bet in terms of who will be the next cabinet minister to leave. And it's 5-6 each of two. Take your pick: Nadhim Zahawi or Dominic Raab.
Yeah, so later on in the show, we're going to discuss the question, do you need to be a potential US president to have classified documents discovered in your gaff and other things that are going on across the water? But encouragingly, when you have a take 6 to 5 the pair, we actually have two people with opinions on this bizarre situation that Rishi Sunak finds himself in with two of his cabinet ministers. How are you, Paul?
I'm very well, Johnny. You?
I'm good. I was racing at Fairyhouse yesterday. It was nice to be racing, watching Goran here today from the comfort of my couch. Life is good. Thinking of whether or not I should try to claim a horse for $5,000 tomorrow at Dundalk, despite the fact I can't afford it. So everything is quite normal, and things are normal in the Conservative Party. William, what the hell is going on?
Right. Gosh, let's keep it to two scandals this week. We can try and be brief. Now, if you're watching this, you probably know all about Nadhim Zahawi's tax issues. Long story short, Zahawi paid a penalty imposed by HMRC as part of an estimated £5 million bill. Ostensibly, this was because he received a lot of income for YouGov shares held offshore. If you want to go and dig into this, Dan Neild, one of this country's finest tax advisors, has been all over it. So anyway, this, of course, has created a big political controversy. Zahawi paid a penalty. And today, the chief executive of H Revenue and Customs, Jim Harrer, was appearing before the Public Accounts Committee, and he said there are no penalties for innocent errors in an individual's tax affairs. A big intervention without it being designed to be a big intervention, because it ostensibly confirms that this was not a sort of innocent error by Zahawi. It would appear to confirm that. Now, obviously, I can't say it for real because I'm not a tax lawyer, but the inclination is very much that this was a penalty paid out of a mistake rather than an innocent error or something as simple as, say, filing your return late.
You have any sympathy for him, Paul?
Well, come on, it's a common problem, isn't it? £5 million tax penalties, and sitting on £29 million worth of assets and not knowing that you might be eligible for some tax. It could happen to any of us. But no, obviously, I'm not full of any sympathy for the Tories in their predicament. One thing that I find really interesting, though, about this story is I think that the way that it has suddenly grown is indicative of the tectonic plates shifting in British politics. That story's been around for a while, right? Zahawi didn't own and sell YouGov yesterday, right? The story, just as a specifically about the investigation, has been around since at least the summer, which is before the leadership contest in which he ran, and after which he was made Chancellor. So clearly there was no appetite to cover it. And then now, of all the media organisations in the world, which one chooses to go after Nadhim Zahawi? The Sun. Right? Now, this is very reminiscent of the early Tony Blair era, the era when Blair swept to power. Labour had been brutalised by the tabloid press for 15 years, right? They didn't know how they would get through an election without being destroyed by the Sun newspaper. And then all of a sudden, Labour found themselves a long way in front due to self-enforced errors by the Tories. It became pretty clear to anybody that the Tories were finished. And all of a sudden, all of these sex scandals and financial scandals and, often things that were really inflated were suddenly all over the press. And the John Major government was sunk by sleaze. And that feels like where we are now, where I could have done this at any point in the last 12 years, giving you list after list of, you know, dubious conservative behaviour by conservative politicians and donors, and it wasn't anywhere to be seen. Suddenly, it's everywhere.
Well, actually, yeah. On that, William, and I don't necessarily have a huge amount of sympathy for Prince Harry or whatever he's called these days, but his vitriolic hatred of the press, particularly the tabloid press, and what's actually not really understood is how the tabloids can have a hold over people by basically bargaining something that they're not yet willing to actually share with the public. And it's an interesting thing that Paul gets at there.
Yes, we are seeing quite a few parallels with the New Labour era, especially that first landslide. The poll leads, the ratings, the type of story that the government continues to be struck down by. All the more damaging for Rishi Sunak, because ostensibly, and I'm not saying I desperately believe this, but ostensibly he was meant to come in and clean things up and then calm things down. But if anything, these sleaze scandals, if anything, have almost intensified. I mean, these are really, really serious. Not just the bullying allegation against Raab, which we'll get to.
24.
24. Yes, very big number. And also, I know we haven't got Suella Braverman in there as well, but also
others on request.
Others on request. Yeah, give it a moment.
Others on request, 5 to 6.
Indeed. I mean, we are in a situation basically where there are any amount of resignation-worthy things surrounding like senior members of the Tory party, and all that's dragging Sunak's image down, and it's sort of making a mockery of the idea that he's meant to come in and be the decent prime minister after two that weren't seen to be for different reasons.
Yeah, to be fair, I think he's managed to do well to get this far without a ridiculous scandal. Okay, let's go to the chase here, Paul. What's the value in this match?
I would definitely back Nadhim Zahawi. Point number one, he is not one of Sunak's people. He's a Boris Johnson person, right? He was very close to Boris Johnson for a long time, right? So he is expendable. He's only, you know, you could call him being party chairman and was he minister without portfolio. It's a significant demotion. So I think he probably is gone, and the fact that Sunak has done a U-turn on this and called him across the ocean suggests that he will abandon him. Whereas Raab is undoubtedly worthy of resignation. He should have been worthy of resignation over Afghanistan, but as we saw in that instance and numerous others, he's kind of like, he sort of seems a bit untouchable. I mean, first point, you go back for the Boris Johnson years, there's no demand for a deputy prime minister, yet Raab was in a strong enough position with the ERG and such forth to be able to claim that. He didn't generally perform well. He's not particularly popular. He didn't perform well during COVID. Then the Afghanistan thing struck, where really nowhere near enough light's been shone on Raab's role in that. Nothing happened. Then there was talk about Boris Johnson reshuffle and that he was going to be demoted by Dominic Raab. And suddenly there was talk about, it's going to be delayed for a few hours for negotiations. Now, sorry, what does Dominic Raab bring to these negotiations?
Yeah.
Exactly. The Prime Minister should be able to do whatever reshuffle he wants. So I think he's strong, he's powerful. Note too, we mentioned Suella Braverman, who's already survived a major scandal. Suella Braverman was Raab's PPS. They're very close allies. So I don't think Sunak's picking a fight with those people. I think there'd have to be like video evidence of him pushing someone's head down a toilet or something to actually get rid of him. But I just think it'll be an ongoing scandal for him.
After hearing all that, William, somebody comes on, wants a monkey to 6. Are you worried?
Yeah, I would be in agreement with Paul as to which side I'm taking. I'm definitely taking Nadhim Zahawi for a couple of reasons. Number one, he just has far more attention at the moment. We are seeing periodic scoops of the Raab story, and I imagine we might see more as the investigations develop. But Zahawi is front and center and sucking energy from other things that Sunak wants to talk about. Number two, and I don't mean to underplay anything that has happened, that might have happened with Raab, This appears to be more egregiously offensive to public opinion of the Conservative Party. I think it's definitely more damaging for the number 10 press operation. And number 3, it's quite possible that the inquiry into Zahawi may come to a head before the full details of Raab's bullying inquiry, in which case he may just be the first if both were to be asked to go. I think Paul makes a very good point about the closeness between Raab and Sunak, and you know, we've had the whole Johnson era was basically a lot of people doing things that would have been resignation worthy around Major time, resignation worthy during the Blair years, resignation worthy during the coalition years, heck, even the early May years, but not going because Boris Johnson liked them. And I wouldn't be surprised if that continued.
Yeah, I when I grew up, I always thought that there was a total lack of accountability in Irish politics, and there was, like, we did go through our years of corruption and cronyism and all that. But we've had a scandal. I don't know. It probably hasn't. It shouldn't have made news actually anywhere other than Ireland, because it's not even newsworthy. Where effectively our finance minister has been under the cosh over the last 2 weeks over whether or not he paid a geezer $1,000 to put up election posters. Like, it's a complete non-story, and it's been in the news for 10 days. And I'm like, why would anyone get into politics for, you know, but then you look, Paul, at Britain and you're like, well, okay, at least we have some level of accountability. But okay, we have to get to the States. Before that, how quickly would you expect to get paid out in this market for both of you briefly?
3 weeks. 3 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, I get the feeling it's a monthly thing. I listen, long term anyway, I don't think the Zahawi thing is remotely sustainable anyhow. I think it's sort of a matter of time. I think the Sunak strategy might have been, if he has to be sacked, can we at least get some official evidence and an official inquiry saying we have found ... etc. But it's probably backfired because the public think he should be sacked anyway.
Also, it's far more realistic to imagine Zahawi resigning. You know, he's not in a prominent position anymore. His career in government's not really moving forward. He could very easily just say, you know, time for me to go. Whereas Raab, you know, is going to take pushing.
Yeah, I think we've probably inculcated in people some interest in this market. And just to clarify here, the bet is void if neither leaves. And that you must correct that on your website, William. It's a grammatical mistake. Neither leaves rather than neither leave. I just throw that in there. But if neither leaves by the end of 2024, the bet is void, so you will get your money back. But according to the lads, give or take, you have a good chance of an 82% return of profit in the space of 3 to 4 weeks. Now let's move on to the US. I want to start with you on this, Paul, and I'm not going to repeat what we spoke about in our WhatsApp group, but there's just. I wouldn't disbelieve anything in the States at the moment, and what's happened with Mike Pence in terms of the classified documents being found in his gaff and so on, which follows on from Biden, which obviously follows on from Trump, which was another level altogether. One could smell a rat. Maybe there's something to it. Maybe there's nothing to it. What do you make of it all?
Well, first point is that I don't find it unbelievable at all that very senior government officials are careless with classified documents, or certainly careless with the protocol. Because I think if you go back to the Clinton email scandal, that was kind of what happened. Apparently she was told by Colin Powell beforehand, this is okay, this is what happens. You don't expect anyone to jump on it. There's also, I just don't find it. I mean, I don't want to get involved in you know, there's enough things that I come out of that are controversial without me inventing.
Let's have another.
But you know, there are a lot of people going around saying, well, Trump has a lot of people in government, in Secret Service, you know, who are very pro-Trump still. You know, this isn't a standard conventional democratic situation in America. There's an ongoing coup going on and people are trying to fight it. So in that situation, is it plausible that the two biggest rivals of Donald Trump have now been stitched up, have this stuff planted or whatever, right? In order to diminish his charges. You know, that is a complete conspiracy theory. I don't have any evidence to back that up, but it is a theory, it's out there and it's worth discussing. I think that, you know, we have to wait and see what special prosecutors say exactly. But as the stories, as I understand it, is not even really close comparison at all between what Biden and Pence are alleged to have done and what Trump has done. So I tend to think that what we're going to see with the special prosecutors is that Biden will be let off with a stern warning, some criticism, and Trump will be charged.
Trump is still only Trump is still only 92 with Star Wars to be the next president. Biden is second favorite. To be fair to Mike Pence, who's just brought out his book as well, which has gotten mixed reviews, he is 33s. William, has that gone out in the betting? And also, how damaging is the Biden stuff to the party, in the sense that obviously it was on its high horse over Trump, and you could conflate the two, but as Paul says, I mean, we're talking about radically different versions of the same thing here.
Yeah, the issue in terms of image is that the genre scandal is fundamentally the same. So it's a great whataboutery point, and it allows all of the right-wing transporting media and all the agitators or whatever, the most effective digital communicators, to say they're coming after our guy, but the president did this, which has a lot of sway. That argument still has a lot of sway. The way that the candidates are responding to it is fundamentally very different. Biden's cooperating, and making sort of every effort to show that he is, which will undoubtedly help with whenever it comes to a special prosecutor. Trump is very much not, very much hasn't. But I think the issue is, generally speaking, this is an optical problem, which Republicans will probably refer to again and again and again, and with the House also in their hands, we can expect pressure through there as well. So it's really not ideal for Biden. I wouldn't say make or break, however, because fundamentally those two are in the same boat. It's something DeSantis could use to great effect, I feel, and that would be sort of the danger there for the president, as far as longer term thinking goes.
The whole, I just want to get you on this, Paul, as well, because I find, you look at the whole George Santos stuff as well, it's absolutely bonkers. But if you look at the dying days of the Third Reich, basically, where 50 million people, give or take, lost their lives, right? And Hitler and his subordinates, a lot of whom committed suicide, they didn't really care if the world ended, right? I wouldn't put anything past Donald Trump, because this is the sting of the dying wasp as well, in the sense that he knows that he's on the verge of becoming an irrelevance. I don't know what he's going to do, but I genuinely will put nothing past him.
No, me neither. Could talk all day about Trump's decades and decades of crime, right? And that gang does seem like it is very cornered at the moment. So I wouldn't put him past him. Just on the betting for the presidency, interesting moves this week, because he's come right back in. He was 10 on Betfair a few weeks ago, back into 5.8 or something today. And that is, I can only think of three reasons for that. One, perhaps the document center, but I'm not convinced that really helps him. Secondly, that he's coming back on social media. He's been green light by Facebook, which is depressing, but it could have an impact. But the third, which is more of an interesting thought, I think, is that maybe DeSantis doesn't run. He's 44 years old, right? He is basically Trump 2. He's Trump 2 without the lunatic outbursts on Twitter, right? With a bit more competence about him. He's 44. If he gets involved now, he goes into a war with Trump that will just be bloody, to say the least. You imagine what smears will be thrown around and conspiracy theories will go up. It might split the Republican Party. Trump might run as an independent. Big risks. Whereas, in 4 years, I don't think Trump's electable now, but he certainly won't be in 4 years.
Okay.
4 or 5 years. So Ron DeSantis runs age 48, inheriting the MAGA base. Tempting, isn't it?
That's actually a fair shout, William. I wouldn't have necessarily thought of that, because, your time is now in politics, but at the same time, as Paul says, he's relatively young. He's very relatively young by the standards of the normal US president. Who knows where Trump will be in 4 years' time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the percentage call would be that this will be the last shot Trump would give for a number of reasons. Maybe age, maybe base, maybe legal reasons as well, financial too. And also there is the risk that Trump, who absolutely has this sort of thinking in him, runs as a third party spoiler. You know, I think there's enough personal enmity between him and DeSantis for him to go and do that, in which case DeSantis could do everything right as regards to trying to appeal to the Republican base as it is nowadays, but still essentially be handicapped. So yeah, running it forward, go on.
On that, Paul, actually, that, like, what do you think the prospects of that are? Trump is an absolute bully and a crybaby, and that's completely plausible. He might do that. And we haven't the horrible rat race between the pair hasn't started yet. But what is the possibility of that spoiler vote, that spoiler candidate? Do you think?
I think he will definitely, if Trump finds himself in a primary, a competitive primary against anybody, DeSantis or not, he will hold that over the party. He did it in 2016. You know, he kept that in his back pocket. And I remain skeptical that anyone has the bravery to take him on and put him in that position. I mean,
when you say bravery now, what does that bravery entail? What are the risks of taking him on?
It involves your life will be in danger. You will be smears, all manner of lies and smears will go viral overnight, and you will have people camped outside your house, and you will have people stalking you, all of that, right? People don't want to take him on for a reason. They said during the impeachment vote, I mean, you even had Tories over here saying this. I've spoken to my Republican friends over there, and they're saying our lives are in danger. That's why we won't vote for him. That's why we won't vote to remove him. So you've got all of that. And like I say, he's 44, he's governor of a big state, he's a star in the Republican Party. If I was DeSantis, I'd be wary about it. And I just think, like I say, I think there are a lot of the Republican candidates, all these people who are limbering up, Mike Pompeo, possibly Cruz, they're all in that boat. They're all in the, let's just see what happens to Trump. If Trump's out, we're in, right? We get a 10-strong primary like the old days. But if Trump is definitely in and he ain't going to prison, and his global backers, shall we call them, are still on his side, I'm not sure anyone will dare take him on.
Well, before I get back to you, William, and we'll finish up, where, Paul, do you think this ends up in terms of this large body of absolute lunatics in the far right who have emerged in recent years in the States? So they either fade into obscurity and go back to their shit lives in front of their laptops with their guns or whatever it is, or something happens.
Well, I think that there is look, it's going to be very hard to de-radicalise people, and you won't de-radicalise everybody, right? You know, we've been under information warfare for a long time. But I do think there's a chance that it's kind of petered out already, because look at the midterms, right? They didn't turn out, did they? You know, they didn't turn out for those candidates.
Well, they still turned out. They just didn't turn out in the numbers.
In numbers, right? You compare that to 2020, you know, the one shocking thing, everything about that election was predictable. Like Biden's vote, I got that almost bang on to the number. 75 million people voting for Trump is incredible. You know, to increase it by 12 million on the previous election. And I think those people, a lot of those people, the people that make an electoral difference, are only doing so for him, right? They won't do it for Lauren Boebert or Jim Jordan or these other crazies. But also, I wonder whether January 6th ended it all, because you know, on the midterms, Trump was trying to organise protests in Michigan and everything, you know, saying the vote was rigged. No one turned up. Literally no one.
Well, On that, William, like I think we're all in agreement here that the Conservatives have no chance whatsoever of winning the next election with Trump as a candidate. I genuinely believe that for all that he's 9-2. I can't see what happens to make the Democrats so toxic that the numbers are going to, because you can see that a lot of Conservatives have obviously gone against him. So what happens, William?
I don't think they're going to think about it in terms of electability, because if that was the case, then Trump probably would never have been picked in the first place. I know we're going back some. I think what happens is Trump runs his aggressive campaign. He leans really heavily into the Biden is also being investigated documents thing. He leans very heavily into the House Republicans and trying to get them to do that pushing for him, and then he hopes some things sort of fall in his favor, and he hopes DeSantis doesn't run. And if DeSantis does run, then we know how brutal that can get. I mean, I remember the 2016 campaign. I remember all of that. So probably a net negative for the GOP if two run in terms of their chances of winning overall. I mean, listen, we're really quite far out. Lord knows what can happen. Both good and bad for both sides.
Well, on the Biden situation, then a man of his age, without being ageist here, I mean, does the last sort of few weeks plant a seed in his mind, like, I'm just done with this shit?
I think it's a fair point. Two things in the Biden age thing. Number one, if it's him versus Trump, then it will be equalized out, because you can make the point that both are old enough. And the Sleepy Joe stuff, as funny as some might find, it doesn't actually really stick. That like his most effective attack anyway. In terms of does he just want to give in stuff? I think if you're doing that, I think he would have just made it very clear he'd be a one-term president already. Because he probably talked about it with the party, so that the party can transition to having somebody they feels ready to fight next campaign. He's probably, I know it sounds ridiculous to say, given that there's still well over a year of this, but if he's in it by now, he's probably in it till the end.
In which case, Paul, he's a great bet.
I do think that at the current odds, certainly for election winner, he's the value. I mean, look, I think
the Democrats are certainly odds on. They're certainly odds on. So if they're odds on and he's odds on, he's not threes.
Yeah, and let's think about it just in the short terms of the price, right? I do very strongly expect that Joe Biden will declare his candidacy soon, right? I am open to the idea that he gets put off the idea, like throughout the time, because polls aren't going well or events. But I think right now he knows he has to announce soon, or else there will be too much speculation. So he will announce. Now at that point, what odds is he then? Even money, 5-4 against Trump. And if Trump is the one coming in, I mean, if it was Trump v Biden, I make it Betfair odds 1-4, 1.4, 3.5 to Biden.
It's just bringing back memories of that. Like, I don't think I've ever actually admitted this, and I shouldn't admit it, but I did go to a place that I shouldn't have been during lockdown for the election party, and it was, I think it was the best fun I've ever had looking at Betfair. It was just the fluctuations of that market, waking up in the middle of the morning, seeing what the odds were, waking up at the more reasonable time in the morning and seeing that the odds changed radically. Last word to you, William.
Yeah, I think there were some really good points made on that. I think the general state of play is there are three people who I think are really capable of winning the presidency right now. That can change, and I think it would be unwise not to look at outsiders or whatever. But at the moment, the big three are Biden, DeSantis, Trump. I think we know that Biden, but if he stays healthy, and there have been no flare-ups at all, nothing that I can find that's caused any concern. I think we know that he runs, and that's still a value angle, depending on how you play it.
Yeah, and if you ask Star Sports, not a related contingency, you might get a bit of the 5-6 as well in this match in Britain. Double it up into Biden to get, what are we talking, 6.5 to 1, something like that. Maybe you've had worse bets. That was the polling station today. What are we? We're getting into late January now, and it's all heating up a bit for Rishi Sunak.